Okay, so let's start in with kind of an overview of the main elements here that go beyond the final exam. I hope you all take some of this stuff to heart. I hope you've already implemented some of it. It's certainly changed my life and the way I look at finance, and I hope it can do the same for you. So our first spot to look at, I think, is the 7 baby steps. So we've got the baby step number 1, and why don't you guys chat box this with me? I won't write them. You guys should have these all memorized, certainly for the test if you don't already. So baby step number 1, chat box. All right, emergency fund. Need more information than that, Corey, but you're on the right track. For the final exam, I want you guys to be specific here. How big is that emergency fund? No, it's not the 3 to 6 months of expenses. That's baby step number 3. I'll come back to you there. $1,000 emergency fund or $500 based on your income. And good, Brooks, you got it there. So $1,000 emergency fund, $500 if the household income is less than $20,000. So we got $1,000. I'll do a little shorthand since you guys are nicely putting it in the chat box. $1,000 emergency fund, or $500 if income is less than $20,000 a year. Then you'll do $500 of emergency fund. Otherwise, baby step number 1, build yourself up to $1,000 emergency fund, and you're going to want to do that because we're not going to be using debt, which kind of flies into baby step number 2. What's baby step number 2? Pay off all debt. Good. So pay off all debt. Now, there's, again, more to this one than just pay off all debt. So we're going to be as full as possible in our description. So Madrid, you got pay off all debt. And then there's one little add-on to that, except for your home, yes. Pay off all debt except house. In other words, if you have it, we're not going to pay that. We're going to get to that later on in the process. So he's kind of crafted these steps that makes it a little easier to kind of work through. Number 3, baby step number 3, I guess I can go back up to Corey. You were kind of in the right spot there. 3 to 6 months of what? Kind of be full, chat box it up. Pay off all debt, 3 to 6 months of expenses for an emergency fund. Good. So this is your fully funded emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses. Again, I'll be a little bit short since you guys have the chat box going. 3 to 6 months of expenses for your new emergency fund. And some of the things we learn later in the course, especially with the insurance chapter, is how that is a form of self-insurance. So we have our emergency fund kind of allows us to change deductibles, and we can cover a lot of our own expenses and whoopsies in life, and a COVID layoff or a COVID drop down to part-time work or a COVID furlough. All of these things have really highlighted the importance that we're going through now, the importance of the emergency fund. So you're in a really pretty good position even through baby steps 1 through 3. So what's baby step number 4? Baby step number 4. 15% of household income to retirement. Excellent, Austin. So 15%. So this was in our retirement chapter. We're going to take 15% of our income and start putting it to retirement. So when we think retirement, we're on a long-term investment horizon. We're not trying to make money in the next year, the next 2 years. We're really thinking 5 to 10, minimum of 5 years, and more likely at least 10 years because we're going to be putting some stuff into the stock market, which has its up and downs. COVID comes, the stock market goes down. But our plan is long term, so we can kind of live our life and do our thing, not worrying about the short term fluctuations of the stock market, because we're in it for the long term, where we'd expect to get 8 to 12% of our money going towards our retirement and that compound interest. All right, baby step number 5. Number 5. All right, college funding. Yeah, so we talked about ESAs. There might be other investment vehicles as we go, but some sort of college fund for kids. So again, you might choose to do 0, or maybe you'll have 0 kids. And if you started to do that before you had kids and it turns out you don't have kids, or whatever the case is, that's still going to be your money. So it kind of plays into baby step number 4. It's like you would have saved additional money beyond the 15% that would still be your money. All right, number 6. What is number 6? Pay off the house. So now we're going to go back. We have everything in order, and now we're going to pay off the house. Definitely anti-American at this point of not having a house debt. So, and then what's the last baby step? Baby step number 7, save and give, build wealth and give. Yes, I like that. Build wealth. And so that's going to kind of roll us into what the heck is wealth, which I'll get to next. So build wealth and give. So the beauty of this plan, once you have the steps memorized, you don't go forward unless the previous ones are done. So that's the logic of this plan. But this is really your roadmap to financial freedom. I mean, if you follow these steps, especially as a 20-something, and you get out of college and you start really following these steps, you're pretty much going to be a millionaire by the time you retire. I mean, if you really follow this stuff, you will have at least $1 million. You can have $1 million just following one of the recommendations. Remember, we talked about paying yourself for your car. We talked about the investment areas. We talked about saving money on insurance. So there's so many different areas. It's really, it would take an unusual event for you not to be financially secure if you wouldn't be if you're following these 7 baby steps. It would take a very unusual event for you not to be very well off and very comfortable in life. A lot less stress in life. We learned that the divorce rate is usually due to money issues, all that kind of stuff. Okay, let me do a little 10-second pause for questions. Anything on the baby steps, our roadmap? Okay, so now to our toolbox. Probably the number 1 tool for financial success is the zero-based budget. So let me go to the chat box and you guys tell me, what is a zero-based budget? You can maybe just even show me an equation. What is a zero-based budget? That is really the number 1 workhorse. If you put it, listen to Dave Ramsey's radio show. He does have a podcast too. If you guys listen to podcasts, time after time after time, when people call in to say that they're debt free, the zero-based budget is the number 1 tool that they say was the key to success. You've got you and your significant other talking it through. Talking the budget through. Corey put every dollar has a name. That's correct, but I want more information. Where's other people on the chat box on this? What is the zero-based budget? Somebody I want to give me a equation. Good, Austin, you got the equation I was looking for. That kind of simply shows the zero that we're looking for. So how we get the zero-based budget is we're doing windshield work. So if as I like to say here, if this is your car, and it doesn't look like it, but I guess this is the front of the car. This is the trunk. Okay, so this is the front of the car. So this is your windshield. So you are looking forward at your budget, and out your rear view mirror is, history. And you want to learn from your mistakes. And part of the reason you might be doing a zero-based budget is because you found out doing a verbal budget or letting, kind of looking over your bank statement every day or whatever, none of that seemed to be working for you. And so we're going to be very forward looking. Grab this thing up here. So forward looking into the future. What should I do with my money? Every dollar needs to get a name. And so you've got your inflow, as Austin put it, and this is going to be, your income. Maybe it's birthday money, B-day money, college grants, any inflow of money, any money that's spendable money in your grubby little hand needs to have a name on it. And so we're going to give every dollar a name today that's in my possession. And then I'm going to just map out my planned outflow. So Austin didn't put this word, which is fine, but I think it's helpful to recognize that this isn't for sure where money's going to be spent, but it's where you plan to spend it. So we had the 4 walls of security. Chat box, tell me what the 4 walls were. We reviewed those through the whole course. What were the 4 walls of security? It seemed like we just reviewed these within the last 2 weeks even, but we really learned them back in the early chapters, 2 and 3 maybe. The 4 walls of security. So they're kind of the first things at the top of the budget. When you start doing the zero-based budget, they'd be near the top. What are the things that are going to, if you're in a crisis time especially, these are the things that you want to make sure that you're paying your bills. If you're short on paying all your bills, yeah, food, shelter, transportation, and utilities. Good, Jacob. So we're going to make sure that we have enough money carved out for those things. So that's kind of our first priority with the budgeting exercise is let's cover the 4 walls. And then we just have that laundry list of stuff that you can create an Excel spreadsheet. You can use the every dollar. The students that I taught in my Financial Peace University class, they were all pretty much using that every dollar app, which is really handy with the Dave Ramsey system. And it is free. There is a payment option that gives you a little more extra details and being able to save your account, but that would be things that you can do. So you got your 4 walls, you got your giving, you got your dog, right? You got your textbooks, got your debts, if you have debts, if you're not through baby step number 2. So all of that stuff you're going to add up and give a name to. And so at the end of the day, inflow minus outflow equals 0. It's pretty simple once you start doing it. Remember, you can have really broad categories. Try to not make it an accounting exercise, but for most college students, I think if you had even just 4 to 6 spending categories, it could be a real big deal for getting started. All right, 10-second pause on zero-based budget.
Russ, how would you start doing a zero-based budget? As like, let's say I'm like, oh, I want to start like today, but I get paid every 2 weeks. How would
Okay. Yeah, so you definitely want to, you can start anytime. So that kind of gets into, it sounds like you're asking the question on the allocated budget, which is just how do I allocate my paychecks over the month? So we can start with a zero-based budget. How it generally works is you start with let's look at the month, because this is kind of the quick sketch, right? And I know I make, $20,000 a year and divide that by 12, kind of like our budgeting exercise that we just did. And so you figure out your monthly budget, you know your rent is this much, this much, this much, and then boom, it's 0 and you're fine. But in reality, the budget that I think you're talking about that you need to take a careful look at is the allocated budget. And all you're doing is you're saying kind of what you said. Here, to kind of more directly answer your question, here's today, and you could take the money in your checking account and do a zero-based budget for it. Some of that might be for an envelope, like a savings that you're going to do. So let's say you have $3,000 in your account today, right? And this is from a little bit from paycheck, whatever. This is in your checking account. And so you're like, oh, okay, I know that I'm trying to save 2,000 of this is for this next fall semester, right? So 2,000 is tuition, which is really a savings account. So you might have a bank set up with a savings account, or if you had an envelope, I mean, in theory, that's probably a lot of money to be keeping around the house. So that might not be advised, but depends on person. You could literally have 20 $100 bills sitting in your underwear drawer that is your tuition for next fall, right? So if you're using the envelope system, you could be putting that into there. And then you're going to take the rest of the money and you're like, okay, I know I got rent coming up. So minus 400. So that's going to leave me 600 left over. Here's the technique that we did. I know I need some food. So I'm going to put 200 into a food bucket. This was, by the way, the 1,000, right? So I had 1,000 minus 400 equals 600, minus 200 equals 400 left. And then just go down the line and spend the money. So minus 100 gives me 300. And then just because I'm out of space on my whiteboard, minus 300 gives me 0. So now I've created a zero-based budget for every dollar in my checking account today. Now, the next thing you're going to do for the month is to say, all right, I get paid on May 15th. So on May 15th, I'm going to get a $400 paycheck. What am I going to do with that paycheck? I'm going to pay, you know, this, and get it down to 0 again. And now I've got that paycheck taken care of. Now, what I do is sometimes if I need to, I'll plan that far into the month, starting at the first of the month. But otherwise, I'll just wait till that paycheck comes. So as long as I kind of have thought through, maybe I needed to save a little bit of my rent back here somewhere. And so let's say part of this was rent. Let's say the 200 was rent, but my rent bill is really 500. So then when May comes, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this paycheck to pay off the rest of my rent balance. And then I'm good with food and everything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helped a lot. Thank you.
Okay. So the allocated budget is the one, and this is your budgeting exercise that I had you guys do at the end. Did that with, you had 2 paychecks. So that is the allocated budget, and they are related to each other. They're both the zero-based budget. It's just this one really has, oops. Let's see what happened to my whiteboard. Did I just hide it? Yep, I just hit it. I thought maybe I did. This one just has more details to it. It's really just this thing expanded out with more detail. Okay, so obviously part of that, as you get debt free, then any debts that you had disappear, so you no longer have debt payments. And your student loans are paid off, and now you might start, you know, one of your line items would be your baby step number 3 emergency fund. So now, okay, this month out of the $400 check, I'm going to put $100 towards my emergency fund, building it up to being the 3 to 6 months level, whatever I choose to get to. And so month by month, you're just always building things, and maybe you need to buy a computer, and now you have a spot to spend that money on. You're just always, every dollar has a name. You're just putting it in different spots. Some of it's for consumption in the next 2 weeks. Some of it's for a computer I'm going to buy 6 months from now. Okay, another 5-second pause for questions. All right. So kind of related to that is the savings account. So we talked about the sinking fund. And so the sinking fund was what? Let me go to the chat box. This was kind of a technique for doing what? Does anybody remember? That was a while ago, but we had the idea of a sinking fund. And so if you want that computer, you don't have the money now, the computer is going to be $1,000. What would be the idea of a sinking fund? So I want a $1,000 computer, but I don't have the money for it now. Save money monthly until you have enough for the computer, right? So if I have the ability to do $100 per month, then that means it's going to take me 10 months to get the computer, to get the $1,000 computer, right? So it's just saving is all it is, but it's just so weird for a lot of people because they're like, oh, but I can get a Best Buy credit card or I can get an Amazon credit card for buying that and I can have it today. That's true. That's the benefit of using credit. You have it today, but you've also taken on some risk that maybe you won't have your job coming up because of COVID, and all of a sudden you have a $100 monthly payment that you can't make anymore, right? And so you're kind of like, oh, in hindsight, I should have paid cash. The other big thing that we learned in the negotiation chapter was that this $1,000 computer might not be $1,000. If I can come in and have cash, or maybe look on Craigslist or whatever, maybe I can buy that computer for $800 instead of $1,000 using cash. So that was an important element there as well. Okay, questions or comments on the sinking fund? All right, so kind of working through the baby steps. So now we got pay off all debt. The debt snowball is the other technique. So another technique related to the baby steps that we learned was the debt snowball. Who can tell me in the chat box the concept with the debt snowball, which was related to baby step number 2, pay off all debts? What are you doing when you create a debt snowball? What was the technique? And you don't have to type out everything, but if you got the concept for the final, you can kind of just work with it. What were we doing with the debt snowball? Imagine that we had, I'll just keep writing a little bit more as you guys looked to it. Yeah, pay the minimum. Okay, small and big. That's the thing that was the little difference. So if we have, 4 debts, and one is my student loan, and I've got credit card number 1 and credit card number 2 and parent loan. So I owe my mom and dad a little bit of money, so we got a parent loan. And so this stuff's kind of stacking up. I've got $23,000 of student loan debt. I've got $500 of credit card number 1, and I've got $300 of credit card number 2, and then my parent loan, I owe them $1,000. So right now, my total debt load here is looking at, what do we got there? $24,800 is my total debts. And how can I knock this out? Well, each one of these is going to have a payment. So let's say that this one was $200. This one had a $70 payment. This one had a $40 payment. And dad was just $20 a month until you can get it done or whatever. And the interest rate might have been higher on some than others. So this one had, 20%. And this one had 15%. Student loan was pretty low. It just had 4%. So we got all these numbers now, and the parent loan was 0%. And so what we're going to do with the debt snowball is we're going to continue to make the minimum monthly payments. Hopefully, we're going to even make more. But my total payments here are I'm doing this in my head here. So what do we got here? $310, $330. So I have $330 worth of debt payments per month. And so with the Snowball, what we're going to do is we're going to order them, as you guys said in your chat box. You order your payments from the smallest debt to the biggest debt. And the reason Dave wanted us to do that was so that we had some early wins. So credit card number 2 is going to be the first one we're going to start making payments on heavy. And so that had a $40 payment. Then we're going to knock out credit card number 1. Then we're going to knock out Dear Old Dad. And then we're going to hit the student loans with a vengeance. And so here's how it's going to look. We're going to make all of our minimum payments, but as soon as credit card number 2 is paid off, I've got an extra $40, right? So now I'm going to continue to make $330 in total because I'm going to take that 40 and I'm going to add it to credit card number 2 or credit card number 1. So by the time I pay off credit card number 2, now credit card number 1 is going to get a $110 payment. Right? So now that's going to wipe out that debt faster. That's part of the debt snowball. As soon as that debt's paid off, then I'm going to take that $110 and add it on to Dear Old Dad's payment. So now when I get down to Dad's payment here, he only wanted $20, but I'm going to start paying him $130. His $20 plus the old debt snowball, since I crossed off number 1 and number 2. Now I'm on to Dad paying $130 a month. And last time I checked, $130 on $1,000, I'm going to be less than 10 months away from paying Dad off, right? So maybe in 8 months. And then finally, what I'm going to do is once I get to the student loan, that's a big monster, right? That's going to haunt some of you guys. You know, quite a few of you are taking on student loan debt, which is understandable. But now I'm going to be paying $330 towards that debt instead of $200. And that's the concept of the debt snowball. So 10-second pause for debt snowball questions. The key is that you ignore the interest rate and you just go small debt to big debt so that you get some of those early wins. And hopefully if you're beans and rice and really working it down, you're not putting into baby step number 4 at this point, no 15% towards retirement. So, you know, at work, you're like, oh, I know some of you were right away interested in investing and you like looked at Ben and Arthur and it's like, Russ, if I put $200 a month into my retirement funds, I did that awesome investment calculator and I could be, you know, a millionaire by this date. Well, what I want you to do instead, and what Dave would recommend, is that if you're on baby step number 2 with this debt snowball, is take that $200 that you think you have and add that on to your $330. Now we're paying $530 onto my student loans, and we're going to wipe those suckers out in no time, right? If you're putting $530 a month towards $23,000 even, you're going to wipe them out pretty fast. And that's kind of exciting to get to that debt-free position. And then now you're used to paying $530. You're going to build up your 3 to 6 months emergency fund in no time. You see how everything's kind of building on itself really fast here once we take that debt-free mentality. So now all of a sudden my baby step number 3 becomes pretty easy because I was used to paying $530 and now I'm paying that towards my 3 to 6 months emergency fund. So that's built up in no time. And now I'm ready to put baby step number 4, 15% into the retirement. And now put into your calculator, now let's just shift that $530 into 15% into retirement, and your little investment calculator is going to skyrocket. By the time you're 40, you're going to have a serious chunk of money. Okay, 5-second pause for questions. That's quite a scribble mark I got there. All right, let's clear that away. So the other kind of financial document that we did early on that we've continued to talk about is the consumer equity. So we mentioned baby step number 7 is to build wealth build wealth and give. And so on the chat box, how do you measure somebody's wealth, or what Dave called consumer equity? What is your wealth? What you own minus what you owe. Good, Brooks. So we're going to have our wealth being for everything you own, the dollar value of everything you own. So that's, if we were in Professor Wagner's accounting class, it would be the dollar value of your assets. So assets minus liabilities, obligations. For personal finance, that's usually the debt category. So if we are debt-free, maybe except for our house, that's the only thing we have here is a house debt on this side of the equation. And that way you own everything else. So over time, we acquire things. Now you maybe have since you're avoiding car loans, you have a car that you own that's maybe worth $4,000. So you got $4,000 to the good worth of car, and you start adding on. So once we start getting to baby step number 4, where are we putting our money? What is our cookies? I'm gonna draw a big fat cookie jar. Oh, that's got like a little opening, but. So that's our cookie jar. So in the chat box, what are some of the financial assets that we're building with our 15% of our income going towards retirement? What kind of cookies are we buying? What kind of cookies? What are they called? We can kind of have it general. Okay, low cap, mid cap, high cap, or large cap is the other name, and international. So that's the 4 types of cookies. A little more generally, what are those cookies though? We had a name for the types of investments they're called. Are they single stocks like Tesla? Are we buying Tesla? Are we buying GM? So GM would be a large cap company that's making some masks now instead of cars. They said they are producing exactly 0 new cars right now. I just heard on a news thing. Okay, good. Rachel and Jeffrey, we're doing mutual funds. So the mutual fund is a separate company. I mentioned like Vanguard and American Century or whatever. So there's 9,600 mutual funds that are run by real human beings. A lot of them are on Wall Street, but they're not necessarily located on Wall Street. And so the large cap, mid cap concept, all of those, you're actually buying a mutual fund. So there's the large cap mutual fund, and that large cap mutual fund has GM and Home Depot and Lowe's and other big companies, Tesla, Microsoft, Apple, right? So when you buy that cookie, you're immediately getting a D word. What's that D word you need to know for the final? What's the D word that we learned in chapter 10? That the reason why we buy mutual funds is because we're getting the D word, which helps lower risk. Diversity, yes. So we're getting that. So diversification is the D word. And so we're buying a diverse set of stocks. We're not buying bonds. We're not buying Bitcoin. We're not buying gold. Gosh, I just talked to my buddy yesterday, and he's, as a hobby, he likes tinkering with the market, and he's talking about buying gold and gold options, and he spends a bunch of money. It's fine if it's treated as a hobby. So I like to say, don't put more, and I think this is Dave's advice too, but I can't remember for sure. Never put more than 10%. If you like to play games with the stock market, it's kind of fun to watch the stock market, and it is, and it can be, and it's exciting and sexy and all that stuff. Don't put more than 10% of your wealth, of your 15% that's going into retirement. So baby step number 4, don't put more than 10% of that nest egg into kind of fun stuff. So, fine, do Tesla, do gold, do options, do whatever you want, but never put more than 10% of that money at risk. So that means if you're stock portfolio of mutual funds has reached $100,000, I'm saying, okay, make sure you keep at least 90 of it in large cap, small cap, mid cap, and international mutual funds. So follow the program. And if you must, play around with Bitcoin and other risky type single stock investments. Never put more than 10,000 or 10% of your nest egg into fund money with your investments. So you can kind of play the market if that's your thing and you want to have fun. Do it with just 10% because you never know when something's going to happen, and you want to continue to get that expected 8 to 12% over the long run rate of return. With the diversification that you're doing and your long time horizon of at least 5, but more like 10 years, you are pretty well assured to be in that 8 to 12% range. And so now when you're thinking retirement and you're not going to have to draw on it for an emergency, why? Because I've got 3 to 6 months of emergency fund, then you're going to have a nice long run of that. Okay, let me do a 5-second pause for questions. Okay, so chapter 11 just talked about the coats. So the coat was what? Let me go to the chat box on the coat. Ooh, this is one of the better coats that I've drawn. I think I was getting better. There we go. So what was the coat in chapter 11? It's related to some of the stuff that you're doing with your investing, but it's not your investments. Your investments are the large cap, small cap, mid cap, international mutual funds. But what was the coat? What did the coat do? So Dave said we put the coat around the jar, and the coat protects us. Protects us from what? Chat box. Somebody hit it up here. What are we protecting our investments from? All right, from taxes. So the coat is government-driven policy to help encourage you to save. So we had the 401k, the IRA, the Roth IRA, all of that stuff. So I say your big takeaways from that are the ones I have listed here. So this is the traditional pre-tax savings. So the benefit comes on pre-tax. The Roth, the benefit of getting rid of taxes comes at the end of the investment. So Dave wanted you to be saving in the form of the Roth as much as you could. So you kind of want to max that one out, except for if there's a match, if your employer, so we work through those exercises of the employer might have a dollar for dollar match. You put in $1, they put in $1. That's like 100% rate of return, even if it was over the course of a year. So you want to take advantage of whatever your employer is offering, and then continue on at your 15% level and maybe look at some Roth options. There are some employers that offer a Roth option as well. Okay, questions or excuse me, questions or comments there? All right. So with the real estate, chapter, I'll just do kind of a little quick review here. You should know how to calculate the loan and calculate interest. Calculate interest is probably the main thing. So the interest that you owe the bank is always on the outstanding balance that you owe, outstanding balance. So this, of course, applies to a credit card balance, your student loan balance, whatever it is. The outstanding balance times the interest rate, I'll put little I here, is the way you calculate interest at any given point in time. And so that, in regard to real estate, people tend to do a 30-year mortgage. But Dave said, don't do that. Do 15-year because you're going to save so much money. The problem why everybody doesn't do a 15-year is that it does have a higher principal and interest payment. So principal, this is with your pal, principal plus interest. So what we learned in this chapter, and it applies to previous chapters, which is why I wanted to highlight it, is that the principal part is your money. This is the debt reduction. So when you make your payment, your balance, your outstanding balance is going down by the principal portion of your payment. The interest portion is profit for the bank, right? So the bank makes profit off your interest so that you don't get back. That was the deal. They gave you money today to buy a house and you agreed to pay them back some interest. So that is kind of the general recommendation. I guess the other thing I might comment there that we saw was the down payment, that you should be putting a 10% down payment when you get to the real estate stuff. Okay, so let's see. That kind of brings me through the stuff I wanted to do. Notice how I just walked you through the baby steps to start, and that's really what the whole book is about. That's what the whole course is about, right? And so I gave you the bits and pieces that are there for implementing the baby steps and the tools that are in the box. There was a lot of time spent on the behavior portion of the course. That's where we got into some of the case studies and other things with how you interact with your spouse and how you interact with money. And so the chapters, especially chapters 4, which was looking at majors and work and building up your skill set for the labor market. So chapters 4 through 8 was a lot of behavioral stuff. And then once we got into chapter 9, we got into more of the finances. So that was the insurance chapter. And we looked at different types of insurance with health insurance, auto insurance. They all had some of those similar elements to them of you're going to pay the insurance company a premium every month. So the monthly premium was the amount you pay, and that's how they make money. And then they actually do investments and hope that there isn't too many COVID crises and tornadoes and car crashes and whatever. And so probably the key part with the insurance chapter, I think, as it relates to our overall program is the emergency fund, that you guys are your own insurance policy. That emergency fund is part of your insurance program for life. There are some things that you can't buy an insurance policy for. And that's exactly what our 3 to 6 months emergency fund is going to do. And the other thing that it allows you to do is to raise your deductible, which was if you get into a car crash and you have $1,000 deductible and there's $6,000 worth of damages, then the insurance company is going to pay 5 of it and you have to pay 1,000 of it. Well, if you have a low deductible like 500, that sounds good, but it makes your premium go up. So that relationship between the deductible and the premium plays a role in your monthly budgeting. And so you want to be in a position where you can self-insure a lot of life for yourself. Okay, so that's a wrap here. Questions? A lot of stuff there. You know, for reviewing for the final, go through your other material. There's going to be about 80 questions of multiple choice, true, false, answer, short answer, that sort of stuff. And matching, very similar to the quiz and homework questions that you had before. So those would be a good way to review and work through them again. That should be a good way to get going. And then have this stuff that I went through. Some of you may even want to review this video again with the baby steps, the zero-based budget, emergency fund, debt snowball, all that stuff. That stuff you should have right off the top of your head. So you are going to have a limited time on the final, so it's not going to be quite as easy as jumping in. So it's helpful to have that. Not to mention it's helpful for your life and becoming a millionaire down the road that you have those baby steps memorized. So you should be memorizing them anyway. All right, that's a wrap. I will stay on the line a little longer. It's been a fun class. You guys have been great with the Zoom modification that we've had to do. And don't forget to fill out your student evaluations too. Since we're at the close, you guys probably have had that already, but I do appreciate feedback. There's a spot for written free response, and that's helpful as I look to future classes on how to do them and whatnot. So take care. And another thing I might mention is I have students come to me later in life and ask me questions. And since you guys have been a student of mine, you are welcome to reach out to me after you graduate. And if you have some questions, I'm always happy to hear from former students and give you a little advice as you cross some of those things later in life as well. Don't hesitate to reach out and give if you want my 2 cents. All right, class dismissed.